Walters is back for another season as the official bar of the Nats Chat podcast. Walters is the best spot to go before and after home games, located at the southeast corner of Capitol and N Streets, right across the street from the ballpark.
And welcome to a very special edition of Nats Chat, along with Washington Nationals insider Mark Zuckerman of MASNsports.com. I'm Al Galdi, host of the Al Galdi podcast. We are recording this on Friday afternoon, January 23rd, the day before Snowmageddon. We hope everyone is warm and safe. It is hard to believe, but the first workout for Nats pitchers and catchers at 2026 Nats spring training is just a few weeks away, February 11th, but not among the pitchers. At Nats camp will be starting pitcher MacKenzie Gore. The Nats on Thursday evening announcing having traded Gore to the Texas Rangers for 5 prospects in a major trade. The 5 prospects now account for 5 of the Nats' top 24 prospects per MLB Pipeline, including shortstop Gavin Feen as the Nats' number 5 prospect. And we are very pleased to welcome to the podcast the architect of this trade, Nats president of baseball operations, Paul Toboni. Paul, it is great to have you on. We appreciate your time very much. How are you?
Doing well, guys. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, appreciate you coming on. So lucky timing on our end to get you here the day after the big trade. Just from a general perspective, taking over the reins of Nats baseball ops and pulling the trigger on a move like this, what was that process like for you? And how do you know when it is time to pull the trigger on such a trade?
Yeah, all great questions. And I'm not sure I have perfect responses to any of them. But what I'll say is I think given my history, like coming from the Red Sox and overseeing the draft for a number of years, I think you just become comfortable, preparing for this moment to come, just like, the start of a draft. And I think with that preparation comes clarity, right? And so we were prepared. And like I've said in, other media outlets, like we set the bar where we wanted to set it. And then, the luxury we had was being able to sit back and be patient because, we love MacKenzie as a player and we were perfectly comfortable holding him. So you can kind of sit back and see if a team is ever going to get to the bar that you've set. And if they do, great. And if they don't, also great.
I know that this didn't come out of left field. His name had been up in discussions really all winter long. And I know at the winter meetings, you're maybe initiating some of those talks. What maybe changed here over the last week or so? And in your mind, if it was going to happen, did it have to happen now? Or could you have gone to spring training and still considered moving him after you guys already reported to camp?
Yeah, no, I don't think it had to happen right now. If we really wanted to, we could have let it drag out a little bit longer. I think anytime you do let it drag out, you're introducing some sort of what I would call deal risk, right? That it goes away. But at the same time, like there, benefits that could come from waiting as well, right? Which is kind of why we waited till yesterday to do this. So, all in all, you asked what changed. Honestly, I think it's the deadline of like spring training approaching, right? And pitchers and catchers just being a couple weeks away where, if you're on the buy side, if you're, the Rangers or the Mets the day before, you're seeing like your team showing up to spring training, or you're envisioning your team showing up to spring training a couple weeks from now. And you're like, okay, we got to go if we're going to do this. And so I think with that deadline comes higher tolerance for teams. And that proved to be true with the Rangers.
It certainly is not your job to answer for things that happened with the Nats prior to the Nats hiring you. But as I'm sure you know, there is a rebuild fatigue with a lot of Nats fans. And so they look at this and they say, wow, MacKenzie Gore, number 1 starting pitcher on the team, and now he's being dealt away. At the same time, 5 prospects coming in. What excites you about those prospects? What about those prospects might we have to make Nats fans who are down about this trade feel a little better?
The sentiment that you shared at the start there, I very much feel for Nats fans, right? Because it's obviously not ideal, right? Having said that, when I hopped over here and speaking for the rest of the baseball operations group, the major league staff, the player development group, really everyone, right? Our job is to come in and evaluate it as we see it in the current moment, right? And then figure out like, hey, how do we get to a spot where we're winning year after year after year, right? And then basically all our decision making is tailored towards that, right? So in doing that, we thought that this move fit. You asked about the prospects. I think a couple things really stand out about the return. One, we're of the mindset that we're getting high-end talent back, and obviously Gavin was one of the top picks in the draft last year. I think he and Eli Willits were the 2 best, or if not the 2 best, 2 of the top 3 or 4 high school position players in last year's draft. So that's really exciting to us. And then Alejandro Rosario, he was one of the best pitchers in minor league baseball in 2024, ran into, some injury concerns, but he'll be back in Adams hopefully sooner rather than later. And, it's rare that you're able to access a pitching talent. I think, that great. And so we thought that was great. And then honestly, the other pieces in the deal, Fitzgerald put together an awesome debut and, more walks and strikeouts, really intriguing underlying offensive traits, stays on the infield. Yeremy Cabrera, great athlete, center fielder, power, young. And then Abimelec Ortiz, he's kind of a more ready now type guy, and he can potentially take up some plate appearances for us at the major league level this year at first base, potentially even DH, and that excited us too.
As you mentioned, you're talking about several potential high-end prospects, especially the first two, but they're also admittedly really young and years away and still like an A-ball at this point. For you, as you try to decide whom is the right fit and who to pursue, what's the challenge between looking for the most talented, even if that means they are 3-4 years away, versus somebody who might be able to have a future with the team, but also that future could be more immediate even as soon as this year?
Yeah, so it's a great question, Mark, and one that we talk about a lot. I think so much of it depends on like where you are on the win curve, right? Coming into this year, right? And I've talked about it before. Like this isn't my opinion. It's a fact, right? Like we lost 96 games last year, and to be able to flip that around and have a playoff team, it's not undoable by any stretch of the imagination, but it's tough, and you're climbing uphill, right? So I think what you want to do is time it up where all the great talent that you have coming to the major leagues is arriving at a time where you're going to be really competitive, right? And then hopefully you can sustain that competitiveness for years and years and years. So for us, we had multiple options of players that were, leading the package, that were more, ready now. And then this type of package, I think at the end of the day, you don't want to get too lost in the weeds and lose the forest for the trees. Like I think that at the end of the day, you just want as much talent coming back as possible, and then trust that it'll play out the right way in time.
The goal, of course, of a rebuild is to make the Nats as great as possible. That said, in this era of 3 wildcard teams in each league, an era in which, 85, 86 wins can be good enough to make the postseason, does that at all change the calculus of a rebuild, the timeline of a rebuild, or do you approach a rebuild the same way as you would have 10, 15 years ago when we didn't have as many wildcard teams?
No, Al, I think it's a great point, right? And honestly, I think it's a great thing for baseball, right? Because I think more teams are sitting here now thinking objectively, we have a better chance of making the playoffs, right? And I think that means there are going to be more players, right? Like really vying to, and their moves reflecting it. So yeah, we keep that in mind as well. And, what I say is, hey, we're going to compete regardless, right? And we're hell-bent on making the playoffs regardless, right? What we want to guard against, though, is, I say it like you put in the windows and the doors before the foundation is really, really strong, right? And I think we're in this process now of making sure that the foundation is really, really strong. So like I said, we can withstand a run for years to come.
I think the question a lot of people had at the end of the season and as soon as you took over was, how close is this team? Is there enough young talent already in place to add to that? And that's the core group that's going to win here in the future? Or is this more of a long-term rebuild? I think we've gathered the moves you've made so far and the things you've said that you're thinking more long-term versus short-term. But I'm curious, did you come in already feeling that? Or was that something you kind of picked up on as you started to evaluate what the organization had already in place? And was there ever a scenario in your mind where you could have said, hey, we're going to be aggressive and add to what we have in an attempt to win sooner as opposed to several years down the road?
Yeah, so a few things there. Like, to me, the way I see it is it's not up for, to me to dictate like with great specificity what the timeline is going to be, right? Because things can change so quick. If James and Dalen and CJ and whoever, right, go out, Cade and, all our guys go out there and have unbelievable years this year, right? They are accelerating the point at which like we are motivated to really push the chips in, right? And so things can change pretty quickly, right? So what may be perceived as, more of a longer term stocking of the system and competitive outlook, that can shorten as things change, right? And the opposite is true as well, right? And so we like to keep a super open mind on it. I'm not trying to be coy here. I think it's just the reality of it, right? Like we want to be open-minded. We want to see how things evolve over time. And if our prospects and our major league talent develops at a pace that outpaces kind of our expectations, what we thought they were going to do, then we're going to adjust our strategy, right? But we just want to be disciplined in the present moment in terms of like, hey, what our strategy is.
When it comes to analytics and sports science, are you comfortable with where the Nats are at, or is there still a ways to go?
No, I think this is always evolving, right? Like, I just came from Boston. I thought we were in a pretty darn good place in Boston, but it wasn't where I personally thought we should be, right? And I think the R&D group would say the same, right? And so the same about here. Like, we've brought some unbelievable people in. We already have the Nationals have had some unbelievable people for years. And now it's just about, I think, making sure that we're continuing to push forward day after day after day.
How much of the personnel that you've brought in, both on the front office side, but even on the coaching side and the minor league staffing side, how much was it a point to make sure that these are guys who fit into that mindset that you're talking about? Was it critical that everybody was kind of on the same page when it comes to being forward thinking?
Yeah, one of the things that I thought was really important during the interview process with really everyone, be it our bench coach and Michael Johns and, assistant general manager and Justin Horowitz, right? Like, I wanted to lay out what my vision was for the organization, right? And how I thought it would look going forward. And, one of the things I preached was, if you're offered this role and you're going to hop on, what's really important to me is 1,000% alignment, because I think the power of alignment in many ways is more powerful than the just getting the smartest, most forward thinking people in the doors, right? If they're not aligned, like, you're not going to achieve your potential, right? And so I did that because at the end of me talking through that, right, then I told these guys, I'm like, hey, if this isn't for you and you're not locked in on what we're trying to achieve as a group, like, I'm telling you, don't hop on board, right? But if you decide to hop on board, the expectation is that we're extremely tight knit, we're aligned on what we're trying to achieve. And then the details of which, like, hey, let's have diversity of thought within that, and let's have really good conversations about it. But in terms of like character values and large, like philosophically, what we believe in development, those type things, those general alignment pieces, like, we got to be locked in.
I'm curious, in Major League Baseball in 2026, when you're thinking about trying to build a contending team, what do you think matters more in terms of winning right now in MLB? Run scoring or run prevention? Like, if we're talking, run scoring, obviously batting and base running, run prevention, pitching and defense, it all matters, of course. You want to excel in all of that. But I'm just curious, from your perspective, what do you think is most crucial to winning in MLB in 2026?
So what I would say is that, we try and put them on the same scale, right? Where, like, for every run we score, it equals, one run we prevent, right? The one thing I would say about that is, once the playoffs start, you can deploy players differently, right? And so, you can maybe ride the starter on 4 days rest or 3 days rest, or you can throw leverage relievers a little bit more, right? So I think, you're probably not giving your starting catcher like days off as you would during the year, right? And so I think the dial probably turns a little bit towards run prevention, but all in all, like, we try and treat them similarly, and then we try to exploit inefficiencies in the market where teams pay too much for, a certain, whether it's, run scoring, run prevention, whatever it might be, and then we want to dip our feet into the other areas where there's a more efficient way of coming on to runs or wins.
We're about 2.5 weeks or so till pitchers and catchers report. And I know, as you look at what a potential roster looks like, there's still some areas that I'm assuming you still want to look to add to. At this point, you've only signed one like major league free agent contract. That's Foster Griffin, who came over from Japan. There have been a few trades, including this one, and some waiver claims as well. Do you feel like there are still major league free agents to be signed, whether it's before spring training starts or even after camp opens, and if you can, maybe some positions that you feel like you still want to address?
Sure. We see, I do think there are major league free agents still out there, whether we are going to be the ones that kind of win the auction for their services. Like, I'm not sure, but we're having ongoing conversations with a number of these players. And I think, especially with MacKenzie now departing the rotation, right? Like, we're going to be active there in the starting pitcher market. I think you always have to stay connected to the reliever market, right? And then we'll be opportunistic around the field as well. So first base is a position that comes to mind. Even the outfield, like we're going to be opportunistic here.
When it comes to first base, I wanted to ask you about that because there are several guys already here, whether a couple of them on the 40-man or a few guys who signed to minor league deals, who have some experience and have played there some, but there really isn't anyone that's like proven everyday major league first baseman. Do you feel like you have, whether it's a combination of guys or one of them that could be that, or do you think there's a decent chance that you do still go outside to find your first baseman?
We have a number of players right now within the organization that I think complement each other well and could fill that hole. But like I said, that doesn't mean that we stop looking either in minor league free agency or major league free agency. We're always looking for ways to improve the team. So we'll continue to do that. And, whether we sign a player or not, I'm not exactly sure. We'll see kind of what the market has to offer, but we want to stay connected to it.
One of the things I know that I'm excited about, and I think a lot of people listening are excited about, is what the Nats' new process under your guidance does for players already here. You know, a James Wood, a Dylan Cruz, a Brady House. And I'm sure you're aware of this. The Nats for last regular season per StatCast, 9th in MLB in highest average exit velocity, but dead last in MLB in highest average launch angle. Hit balls hard, but didn't hit balls with much launch. And it was really interesting hearing from your new hitting coach, Matt Borgschulte. He was pretty open about, hey, we need some guys to hit with some more launch. I wonder if you could speak to that. It's easy for us on the outside looking in to talk, hey, you got to hit the ball with more launch. But man, it sure seems like you have guys who hit balls hard. Dylan Cruz seems to fall into this category. And if you just tweak a few things, you can maybe start to get the offensive results that this team has been in need of. Yeah,
so I think, it's certainly not as easy as just flipping the switch and getting guys to elevate balls, right? Well, first of all, I think we should just acknowledge the fact, right, that like a ball hit 110 miles per hour on the ground isn't nearly as effective as a ball hit 110 miles at 15 degrees or 20 or 25 degrees or 30 degrees, right? And so, acknowledging that, I think at the start is important. But I also think it's acknowledging that, hey, for a player that is on the ground a ton, right? And if the primary development goal for that specific player is to get him in the air more, right? Oftentimes that comes with the trade-off, right? So whether it's a bit more whiff, whatever it might be, right? Like those are things that you have to talk through as well, right? So oftentimes in getting a player to make some changes, there might be some deficiencies that pop up as well, or some trade-offs that pop up. But in my experience, if the player is fully bought in, if the coaching staff is fully bought in, a lot of the time it's still worth pursuing because the trade-off really isn't as damaging as the benefit that could come from getting guys in the air a little bit more.
One of the guys who actually is pretty good at getting the ball in the air when he's going well is CJ Abrams. We saw the dominant first half that he had and then the way he cooled off in the second half. I know, just like MacKenzie Gore, given his contract status, that there has been some interest potentially in him this winter. As we get here closer to spring training, do you believe that he is still part of your 2026 opening day roster? And if he is, how do you get him to be the player for 6 months that we've seen him be for 3 months?
Yeah, so it's a great question. CJ is, like, in my opinion, one of the most talented athletic players in the big leagues, right? And we've had these conversations with CJ. I'll say it to you. I think like the next step for CJ is making sure that, all that athleticism manifests in really good production, right? I think there are ways right now that it does, and also ways that he's probably, leaving some production on the table, and we want to tap into that. So whether it's defensively, from a range standpoint, from a arm standpoint, arm accuracy standpoint, right? Yeah, power standpoint, like he's got a lot of different levers that he can pull to be a more productive player. So we're excited to realize that with CJ. Yeah, I mean, obviously he's one of those players that teams are going to call on pretty much every day or every other day or whatever it is. But CJ is a huge part of this, and we're here to support him and help him realize the best version of himself.
The Nats, even when they were good, had problems putting together good bullpens. We know how it is with relievers. They are fickle, they are volatile, they are year to year, they are unpredictable. From your perspective, what are the keys to constructing a quality MLB bullpen?
Al, I think the biggest thing, honestly, is making sure that you're developing really good depth internally, because It's not all that sustainable to go into the free agent market every single year and go and spend $50 million on whatever, 5 or 6 relievers, right? It's really, really challenging to sustain a healthy roster that way. That said, if you're doing a really, really good job drafting, trading for, signing internationally, guys that can, come up and be good out of the pen, it's just a lot more sustainable way of doing things. Now, that might take a little bit of time, but the hope is that we look up a few years from now and we have players that are popping up in our pen that are throwing hard, that have big stuff, that are filling up the zone and on the attack, and that we can just keep pulling from these guys over and over and over again, because that allows us the freedom to then hopefully spend money elsewhere.
A little bit of a bigger picture question here, but it ties into some developments that have happened recently, and that's the Nats TV deal. As you know, the move away from MASN going to the MLB-produced broadcast, for many years, the organization viewed their TV deal as a hindrance in some ways to what they could do budget-wise, financially, payroll-wise, those kinds of things. Do you have a sense if the new TV deal impacts in any way the way that you can proceed with acquiring players, adding to payroll, signing players to long-term deals, any of that kind of stuff? Or do you feel like it doesn't necessarily change anything?
You know what? I'm probably not the best person to ask that, candidly. I focus on the baseball stuff and making sure that, we're bringing the best players we can in the door. That said, I have full belief in our business side and our ownership group that they're making the best decisions from a business perspective that can hopefully support the baseball side as great as possible going forward.
Since the decision was made a couple of weeks ago, that nobody's come to you and said, okay, this changes this or that.
No, we've had conversations about it, but they're conversations that I'll keep private. And that's just a personal preference, because, I'm more than comfortable talking about all this baseball stuff because I'm really comfortable talking through it. This business stuff, I'm not nearly as informed on. And it worries me that I might misspeak and sound like an idiot.
People are always interested in ownership involvement. With something like the MacKenzie Gore trade, do you have to get Mark Lerner's approval, ownership approval? Do you just run it by them? How does it work in terms of ownership with a big move like a MacKenzie Gore trade?
Yeah, I think like any other baseball organization, you want to get ownership approval. I mean, these, like MacKenzie, means so much to the organization, right? He's obviously been such a big piece of what the Nationals have done the last few years. And honestly, even if it wasn't quote unquote required, it's something that I would want to do, because it's, I think so much of what will allow us to achieve organizational health going forward is building a really strong relationship and a foundation of trust and working well together and being in lockstep on how we think through these things, and the fact that we're aligned in how we think through these things, I think only will bode well for the future.
So maybe along those lines a little bit, and again, kind of bigger picture thing here. When you took the job, I'm sure you, in your mind, had an idea of what you thought it was going to be like. I'm curious now, 4 months into it, how much has been what you thought it would be? And has any part of the job surprised you, maybe you didn't expect?
I was asked this question the other day, and I think it's largely aligned with what I thought it was going to be like. I will say a couple of things that surprised me. One, you just assume that you're going to be spending so much of your time with everyone in the organization over the course of the first few months. And that's just really challenging just physically, where I'm apart from so many of these people. There's so many people in the organization that I still haven't met in person, right? And that never really registered in my mind that would be the case. But, where I stand today, it's obvious why that's the case, right? So I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully, I look up 6 months from now and I have met everyone in the organization, but it's tricky. We have scouts working internationally that are rarely in DC, but I want to get down to the DR, and folks that work in Florida and being down spring training, that'll help. And our scouts around the country, so on and so forth. So that's maybe the first surprising piece. The second piece is, I knew this would be the case, but until it actually happens, maybe you don't fully empathize with it. And that's just all the non baseball operations obligations, right? Whether it's, media stuff here, right? Or, working with the business side on really important conversations that'll help, propel the organization forward. Those just aren't the things that come to mind, I think, when you're considering whether you're going to take the job. And so they've all been parts that I've really enjoyed, meeting the different media members, Mark, you included, Al, you included, and then thinking of all the other media members and everyone on the business side. I've really enjoyed it.
Nats president of baseball operations, Paul Toboni. Paul, we know these last few days have been very busy. We appreciate your time very much. All the best.
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me on. Good luck with everything.
Ahead of Massey, 1 ball, 2 strikes. The windup, the kick, and the pitch. Swing and a miss. He struck him out with a slider, and it's a new career high. 11 strikeouts for Gore as he puts away Massey to end the last of the 7th inning.
All right, well, we hope you enjoyed our conversation with Paul Toboni. We had that scheduled before the Nats traded MacKenzie Gore, so it's funny how things work out. A salute to the man who created this podcast, executive producer Tim Shovers. He had the foresight to say, hey, let's get Toboni on the pod, and sure enough, it worked out to where we got him the day after a big-time trade by the Nats. So yeah, MacKenzie Gore traded. We knew that this might happen. It has, in fact, happened. The 5 prospects obtained by the Nats: shortstop Gavin Feen, starting pitcher Alejandro Rosario, infielder Devin Fitzgerald, outfielder Yeremy Cabrera, and first baseman / outfielder Abimelec Ortiz. The 2 big prospects here are Feen and Rosario. Gavin Feen was the Rangers' number 2 overall prospect per MLB Pipeline, was taken by the Rangers with the number 12 overall pick in the 2025 MLB first-year player draft out of a high school in California. And Rosario is interesting. The Rangers' number 6 overall prospect per MLB Pipeline. He, a year ago, was a top 100 prospect in the sport. He soonest to undergo Tommy John surgery, but he was a number 50 overall prospect in baseball per MLB Pipeline going into the 2025 season. But, you know, Mark, we can talk about the prospects. We can talk about the reasoning for trading MacKenzie Gore, and there are very good, very sound baseball reasons for making this trade. I believe I applaud Paul Toboni for doing this. But, you know, I almost feel like if we're going to discuss the trade, you have to start by putting all of the analysis to the side. And I know that I heard from a ton of Nats fans over the last 24, 48 hours, you as well. There is an anger. There is a real almost ferocity from the Nats fan base of here we go again. And I think plenty of Nats fans understand the baseball logic behind this, but that doesn't take away the pain of this, of here we are again, the Nats trading away a star player. And of course, the irony here is that this is a guy who the Nats got via trading away another star player in terms of Juan Soto back in August 2022. So, you know, there is plenty of time for the analysis, but the emotion here, I think, matters a lot.
I agree. I think it's easy to look at this individually and say, yes, for baseball reasons, this made sense. That this is a team that probably isn't going to be ready to win anything big while MacKenzie Gore would still be under club control for 2 more years. And we've gone through this dance before, but as a Scott Boras client, chances are he was going to go all the way to free agency in 2 years, and maybe there'd be a chance at re-signing him, but there's a good chance that you don't. So you understand why Toboni would look at the situation and say, if this guy isn't going to help us win in the next year or 2, it's best to get what we can for him now and think long term. And so I don't think you can fault any of that logic when it comes to this particular individual case. The problem is you can't view this just in a vacuum. This fits into a much larger pattern that's been going on now for too many years. And to me, it's what you said. It's this idea that, 3.5 years ago, Mike Rizzo has to make the hardest trade you're ever going to make as a GM. A superstar player helped you win a World Series, potential future Hall of Famer, and you're trading away at such a young age in exchange for 5 prospects. And as hard as that was, I think most fans, we've talked about this, kind of bought into the idea of the rebuild and understood why it was happening. And as painful as that was at the time, you could feel like, okay, this is going to pay off 3-4 years down the road. But the key to that was that some number, if not all, of those 5 prospects they got in return would be a big part of the next team that won here in DC. Well, they haven't come close to winning yet. And now you're already trading away one of those guys who, by the way, has already been an all-star. There's a chance, depending on what happened with CJ Abrams, that could be a second all-star acquired in that trade who's also then traded away before this team has won again. And so there's legitimate reason to be upset at the bigger picture here and what this all means, and to feel like we're just going through this all over again. It's really disheartening to think that he's admitting it. They're not trying to win this year. Maybe by next year, but it may be beyond that. as well. That's a hard pill to swallow, and it's a hard thing to sell to a fan base that is way past the point of having given up their patience for this. Now, I can't fault Paul Toboni for that. He took over the job. He had to look at what they had in the organization, and in his view, they were not in a position to add to what they already had. He felt like they needed to think long term. But it is a pretty big indictment of the situation that he was handed when he took this job. And quite frankly, he probably doesn't get this job if the situation wasn't as big of a problem as it was.
Yeah, there's a reason he's here, and that is that the rebuild failed. And, we wondered when the Nats on July 6th fired Mike Rizzo and Davey Martinez, was this going to ignite another rebuild? Or maybe possibly does the person who ends up running baseball ops try to ignite the rebuild, re-energize the rebuild? And, maybe the Nats can get to a point to where they're good sooner rather than later. It sure sounds like the former is the case here, that the rebuild is being restarted. Now, I would say if the rebuild this time is done properly, then the rebuild should not take, 4 or 5 years. It should take more like 2 or 3 years, but that's still 2 or 3 more years that Nats fans have to wait for the team to be good again. I mean, the phrase I've been using for over a year now is rebuild fatigue, and I think so many Nats fans have that, and I think we 100% understand that. But, with Paul Toboni, I think there is, almost like a cold-blooded mentality that he has to have, which is, I understand where Nats fans are coming from, but it's my job to fix a broken situation. It's not his job to be saying, okay, well, Nats fans have been through enough, so we need to try to win now. He needs to do what is in the best interest of this organization in order to build sustained success. And that's the idea here, lasting, sustained success. And, the more we get away from Mike Rizzo and what was going on here, look, Mike Rizzo did a lot of great things, and he deserves a lot of praise for a lot of what he accomplished. But it doesn't make his final few years here look very good that this rebuild needs to be restarted. And there's a reason that he and Davey Martinez got fired this past July 6th. And so, if you have venom right now as a Nats fan, we all get it. Venom being spewed at ownership, we get it. But I still don't understand the lack of venom for Rizzo. And it's interesting. I look at all of the feedback certainly I got on X over the last 24, 48 hours. The name Mike Rizzo barely comes up. It's really interesting. The anger is directed toward ownership, which I totally understand, and even a little bit toward Toboni. And it's almost like Rizzo continues to get a pass. And it's just like, hey, if he had done a better job here, the Nats wouldn't be in this position. They are in this position. And so Toboni is doing what he feels like he needs to do. And so I can't be mad at Toboni. I think he's doing what needs to be done. Hopefully what he does works. And hopefully the Nats are good again sooner rather than later.
I think the great unanswered question, we've had it, so many people have had it over the last few years, was how much was Mike Rizzo denied the ability to add to what they already had in place? And if he was given the ability to add to it, would it have made a real difference? Or would they still have underperformed, and was there still not really enough in-house to make this successful? I think we can say for sure that while he did leave with a pretty good number of high upside, very talented young players on the big league roster, there's only a couple in the farm system. The depth of the organization, I think, really is maybe the number one reason that Toboni is in the position that he's in. I don't think it's a lack of potential top talent that they have, again, already at the major league level. But there isn't nearly enough beyond that to say, yeah, we're in a position to be able to try to win here soon. And I think that more than anything is what he looked at and said, we have to restock. A lot of these moves they've made, this one I'm getting a little off topic here, but a lot of the moves they've made aren't necessarily geared toward trying to improve the major league roster. It's just trying to put together enough organizational depth to be able to field a AAA team and a AA team and have some guys who maybe can be called up along the way when you need help. That's how barren things were there. And that's discouraging. The other bigger picture part of all this, and I think this is where a lot of the fan frustration especially comes in, and I get this because I have the same, concerns, is let's say Toboni and his team pull this off. And let's say in 2 or 3 years, they do have a contending team again, and it's some combination of James Wood and Dylan Cruz and the young guys who are already here, plus some of the ones they've acquired since. Can they sustain that? Can they keep that team together and add to it? But of course, that's a question of spending money. Can they re-sign any of their homegrown players to long-term extensions? Can they go out and sign real free agents to supplement what they have? Or are we going to be talking about, even if the team is a winner in a few years, are we going to be talking about going through this same cycle? And eventually we're going to be saying, hey, James Wood, he's a couple years away from free agency. Are they going to have to look to move him too? It's really a question of, is the long-term goal here to become the Nationals of 2012 to 2019? Or is the long-term goal here to become some version of the Tampa Bay Rays, which is a team that does have success and can get to the playoffs, but does not retain anybody, and it's constant turnover and churn? I don't know yet where that's all headed. There's a lot of things that have to happen between now and then, but I think that's the biggest fear that a lot of fans have, is this just an endless cycle, and it's never going to get to a point where they can feel attached to legit top players who are here not just for a few years, but here for the long run.
Absolutely. And we don't know. And we're not going to know for a while for sure. I mean, Washington, D.C. is a top 10 media market. The MLB team of Washington, D.C. should not be run like the MLB team of Tampa, Florida. Okay, let's make that 100% clear. I mean, the one thing that I always cling to when it comes to this is the Nats per Cots baseball contracts ranked in the top 10 in MLB in year-end 40-man payroll in each of 8 consecutive seasons, 2013 through 2020. But we know that things were different back then because the patriarch, Ted Lerner, was still with us for that time. And I know there's a belief that once he left us, that changed the philosophy of ownership. But we'll just have to wait and see. I mean, I am encouraged that it does seem like ownership is spending more on infrastructure. I think that is encouraging, but that's different than spending on payroll. And we're just going to have to wait and see on something like that. When it comes to what the Nats got back from MacKenzie Gore, so a lot of mixed reviews about whether the Nats got a good haul of prospects or like a mid haul of prospects. From the people you've talked to, from the research that you've done, what do you think is fair to say about what Paul Toboni got back from MacKenzie Gore?
I think the phrase that you've seen from a lot of people around the game, and you've seen other reporters kind of quote this as well, and it's what I've gathered as well, is that they feel like they got quantity over quality. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't going to be several really good players who come out of this. But the difference between this and, say, the Juan Soto haul, which let's acknowledge is like a once-in-a-lifetime haul in a trade, and you're not getting that from MacKenzie Gore. But what you had there were some surefire prospects. Everybody knew James Wood was a big-time prospect. Everybody knew that MacKenzie Gore and C.J. Abrams were top prospects, and on top of that, big league ready, having already played in the big leagues at that point. They knew that Harleen Susana had a huge arm, and you never know what's going to happen, but like that was a guy that people knew of and were excited about. In this case, you don't have that one obvious guaranteed slam dunk player that's going to be here within the next couple of years and become a superstar. You know, Gavin Feen, number 12 overall pick just last summer. So there's a lot of reason to believe that he can be that guy. He's barely played in the minor league so far. Let's see, 6 months from now, once he's got half of a season in the minors, that might change the opinion of him. The pitcher, Rosario, tons of upside there, but the injury thing is kind of weird. He missed the whole year with an elbow injury, and we don't know the exact details of what happened with Texas, but we've kind of seen things like this happen in D.C. before where maybe they didn't think surgery was necessary, so they tried to rehab and wait it out. Well, in the end, he needed the surgery anyways, and he still hasn't had it yet. He's about to have it in the next couple of weeks, and so he's going to miss the whole next season. Now you're banking on everything goes well, and he comes back from that, and a year from now he's in the system, maybe at AA, and the path to the big leagues comes from there. But we know there's no guarantees from that. A lot of guys have the surgery. Most of them come back as good as new, but not all of them do, and the timelines are not always as clear-cut as you hope they are. And just look at Cade Cavalli and Josiah Gray for evidence of that. So you hope, but you don't really know. The other guys are kind of lower end, still very young, so they may turn into something. I think the biggest disappointment, and I asked Paul about this, is that there's really only one who's kind of major league ready, and that's Ortiz, the first baseman, who may provide some punch for them. If they don't go and get another first baseman, he could be a part of the mix. But I don't think he's necessarily a long-term solution there. It doesn't at least come across that way. So I think the disappointing part of it is that, number one, there is no real sure thing from the group. And number two, there really isn't anyone who's going to make an immediate impact. And I understand you have to think long term, but when you're getting 5 guys back, you'd like to hope at least one of them is somebody who's not just has a chance to make the team, but it's like, yes, he's going to be on the team. He's going to be a part of the everyday lineup.
So many of the Nats' well-regarded prospects now are shortstops, and that is a good thing because generally speaking, if you can play shortstop, you can play anywhere else in the infield. But you think about Eli Willits and Gavin Feen and Luke Dickerson and Seaver King and Coy James. So going to be interesting to see what happens with these guys and how they end up being deployed, if they end up making it.
The initial word on Feen, and again, they're going to see how this all plays out. He's still very young, is that he'll split time between shortstop and third base at the outset. And it seems like even prior to the trade, there was discussion of, is this guy destined for a corner infield position or maybe even an outfield position? He's a big kid. I think he's 6'3", 200, and he's still only 18 years old. They'll give a shot at shortstop. The attitude is always play him at shortstop until they show they can't do it, and then you move him somewhere else. Don't worry about how many other shortstops are in your system or who might be blocking him. You never know how that's going to play out. So get a look at him there. But I do think there's probably reason to believe that in the long run, he's going to end up either at third base or maybe even at first base.
And then there's MacKenzie Gore, and I think it's going to be so interesting to see what happens with MacKenzie Gore moving forward. There are plenty of very good starting pitchers who take multiple seasons to become very good starting pitchers. Is that MacKenzie Gore? Is he about to blossom, or is the MacKenzie Gore who we saw during his time with the Nats more or less the MacKenzie Gore who we end up seeing for the remainder of his career? MacKenzie Gore, over 3 regular seasons with the Nats, 2023 through 2025, was durable. 89 starts, 462 and a third innings. Was a strikeout pitcher, 10.06 strikeouts per 9 innings. That's good. But he, over that workload, had an ERA of 4.15, an ERA plus of 100, and a whip of 1.39. He overall was a league average pitcher. I mean, ERA plus of 100 is exactly league average. And, how he got there, I think is fascinating in and of itself. He at times was great. He at times was quite bad. His highs were high, but his lows were low. And so he ended up being a league average pitcher for the Nats. And, the truth is the idea of MacKenzie Gore was grander than the reality of MacKenzie Gore. If you are being objective about this and you are assessing how he performed for the Nats, he was not an ace. He showed signs of being an ace, and he still has the potential to be an ace, but he was not an ace. He was a league average pitcher. And so what happens with him moving forward is going to be so interesting. We wondered if the Nats, with their new process, might want to get their hands on MacKenzie Gore for a season or half a season and maybe get the best out of Gore and then trade him, or, maybe hold on to him. Imagine that, right? I wonder if the Nats trading Gore says anything about what they think of him. Maybe Paul Toboni, deep down inside, isn't as high on Gore as other people are. Or maybe Toboni was like, look, I'm very high on Gore, but what is in the best interest of the franchise is us trading MacKenzie Gore now. So, this is a secondary storyline to what happens to the 5 prospects. But yeah, MacKenzie Gore, how good does he become? And does he end up being a lot better than he was here? Because what he was here, factually speaking, was a league average pitcher.
And I think that ties into the return they got. If he was a little more consistent, a little more on the clear upswing, they maybe could have gotten more. And you're getting, a team's number 1 prospect or somebody who is major league ready as opposed to somebody who's still 18, 19, 20 years old. I think that ties into it. When Gore is good, he is elite. He looks as good as anybody. His dominant starts are a thing of beauty to watch. As you point out, when he's not good, he's really bad. The key for the last couple of years, we talked about it a lot, was not that he needed to be great more often. It's just that he needed to be average more often and not let the bad starts go so far south on him and just find a way to give him 5-6 innings and keep it to 3 runs. And if he had done that, I think we'd be talking about a different kind of pitcher here. Now, he didn't. So I think a couple things to consider. One, he was the victim of some bad luck. We know the defense behind him wasn't always great here. Texas, based on what they already have in place, much better defensive team. How much difference does that make? Number 2, he has never, it's not his fault, but it's true, he has never really pitched in a game of consequence, in a pennant race game, a game that really mattered. The Rangers are hoping that he will be doing that for them because this is a team that is going for it, given the roster they have built. Who shows up when he gets into one of those big starts in July, August, or September? Does that elevate his game? And he does pitch like that frontline starter because the significance of it picks up for him? Or is he not able to handle that? He's never been through it before. We don't really know. We know that sometimes starts could go south on him, and that was often in games that really didn't matter in the larger picture. So we need to see how it goes for that. And then the final point would be, he's 2 years away from free agency. At some point, he's pitching for his next contract. He probably hasn't had to think about that yet, but over these next 2 years, there's going to be a lot more attention on him. And certainly a year from now in 2027, in his walk year, how does he handle that? We've seen guys who take that situation and make the most of it and turn it into a huge payday after that. We've also seen guys who were good quality players, good quality pitchers, and the pressure of that walk year actually gets to them and they hurt themselves and end up with a much lesser contract than they thought they were going to get. So I will be fascinated from afar now to see how that all goes for him. Selfishly, I'm going to miss him a lot. I liked MacKenzie Gore. I really liked watching him pitch. I believed in that ability. I enjoyed talking to him. I know it wasn't a great quote, but I found him engaging in his own kind of quirky way, a real competitor. I'm going to miss him. And, to me, it's tough to think about going through a whole season and every 5 days somebody else who's probably not going to be as good as him taking the mound. I hope the best for him. I really hope he does live up to that because I've believed in him since they acquired him that he can be a number one starter in the big leagues. It's now up to him to see if he can do that with another organization.
Well, and we know that he so badly wants to be great. He was a guy who was very hard on himself. Like, you could tell he really cared about being a good starting pitcher, and we'll see how well he does with the Texas Rangers. So much to be thinking about with the Nats right now. We always want to hear from you. Hit us up on X at Nats_chat. You can find Mark on X at Mark Zuckerman. You can find me on X at Al Galdi. You can also find the podcast on Blue Sky at Nats Chat Podcast. You can email us natschatpodcast@gmail.com. And we have a website you can access as well, natschatpodcast.com. We appreciate you listening very much. As has been the case throughout the offseason, we will continue to come to you as news developments warrant. In the meantime, stay warm, stay safe. For Mark Zuckerman, I'm Al Galdi. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on the Nats Chat Podcast.
With the 12th pick of the 2025 MLB Draft, the Texas Rangers select Gavin Feen, a shortstop from Great Oak High School in Temecula, California. The San Francisco Giants have the next pick.
Some things in life are just made for each other. Peanut butter and jelly, macaroni and cheese, Modelo and college football. College football season is Modelo season, and the season has officially kicked off. The Modelo Recruiter is back in action, looking to reward full-time fans who give their all for their team and their school week in and week out. If you're listening to this, you've been recruited. So lace them up and get out there. And don't forget to make time for a well-deserved ice-cold reward. Because college football wouldn't be the same without you. So grab yourself a Modelo and enjoy, the official beer sponsor of the College Football Playoff, Modelo.